Well, shalom, dear friends, and welcome to this session of Hebrew School. I believe this is the 27th session that we have had. And of course, we are now doing pretty much exclusively just readings from the Old Testament and the New Testament. I want to give a little bit of background about the reading we'll be doing today. It is from Genesis chapter 11. And for those of you who are familiar with the book of Genesis, you know that chapter 11 is the story of the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of, in Hebrew, it would be Babel. So let's go ahead with our little bit of background and preparation. Although the first thing I want to do is share with you a website. It's called Hebrew4Christians. And the 4 part in the website address is a number 4. So it's the word Hebrew, 4, the number 4, and Christians. This is a website that's run by John Parsons. He is a pretty well-known Messianic, Hebrew roots, Messianic Jewish Christian type guy. The way I became familiar with him is that he is the author of a book that I'm pointing to here. It's called Zola's Introduction to Hebrew. So it's a Hebrew language book that he published in conjunction with the Zola Levitt Ministries television program and so forth. And for their free newsletter, John Parsons writes a little one-page Hebrew language article each month for their free newsletter. This website is kind of really neat, kind of really helpful. They've got some grammar stuff in there, Hebrew grammar stuff. They've got some blessings. And what I mean by that is like biblical and traditional Jewish blessings, prayers, and things like that. So there's a portion of prayers, a portion of scripture reading, focusing on the Hebrew language. There's an article on their website about the names of God, the various names of God, like Adonai, or Yahweh Rapha, which means the Lord our healer. Lifestyle stuff, holidays, like biblical holidays like Passover and Tabernacles and so forth. Meditations, which is like little devotions. Clear thinking, I forget what that's about, several articles. They've even got some like Jewish humor that's I don't know, you may not be interested in that too much. About Hebrew4Christians, a little bit of Parsons' background and the ministry that he does. There's a glossary of some Hebrew stuff and some links to those who might be interested in Hebrew language and Bible things. And then they've got an online store where you can buy not only his Introduction to Hebrew book, but also some other Hebrew language resources, all kinds of Hebrew Bibles and things like that. I will say that I'm not sure how well John Parsons keeps this website up to date, because I clicked on some of the resources from the online store, and those links don't exist anymore. But the stuff that's on there is really neat. I have taken some of their prayers and blessings and scripture readings and things like that, and just made screenshots of it and included on my daily worship and Bible study and prayers list that I use. So I have on my devices, on my iPad and my iPhone, kind of a liturgy for daily prayer, and a lot of it. A lot of the stuff that I use is drawn from this website. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Maybe check out Hebrew4Christians. You might find some stuff there that is helpful for you. By the way, this introduction to Hebrew is very, very basic. But you know, that's good for people who are just learning Hebrew. It's basically teaching you the alphabet, how the vowels work, learning to pronounce words and how sentences go together and stuff. So it's very, very basic stuff. Not much in-depth grammar and syntax and things like that. Okay, wanted to do that little commercial. Let's go on by looking at a Bible chart from Alfred Eads' Bible study charts series on the entire Bible. And so what we're looking at on the screen right now is what dispensational theologians call the age of human government. And it starts after the flood of Noah's Ark, when Noah and his three sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, get off the ark. And God gives them this command to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Which means they are to get busy with their families, particularly the three sons. I don't think Noah had any more children after the flood. But those three sons produced, entire races and populations of people over a fairly lengthy period of time. So the idea was for them to repopulate the entire earth after the flood wiped out everybody but 8 human beings. So they were supposed to multiply and replenish or repopulate the earth, which means that they were supposed to spread out. And in the map that we will look at in just a few seconds, you'll see that the descendants of Ham kind of settled in the African continent, the sons of Shem in what we would call the modern day Middle East, and the descendants of Japheth up north and west in Europe and Asia Minor. And so that's where they eventually gravitated to. But after the flood, the trend was, and the kind of the inclination of the people was to gather in kind of one location, and it's where the Tower of Babel was built. And so what you had was a growing population of people kind of centered in one place. And God wanted them to be scattered. This gathering in one place was kind of disobedience to God's command, to be fruitful and multiply and replenish or repopulate the earth. Meant they should scatter out and populate the various continental areas and so forth. So they were being kind of disobedient here. And after the Tower of Babel story, then they spread out and they go to Africa and Arabia and Assyria and Asia Minor and Europe, as God always intended. But he kind of had to overcome this kind of sinful, disobedient tendency. I think one of the lessons that we can learn from this, since this is called the age of human government, is that when you have a large, densely populated, centralized government, things go wrong and God is not pleased. God believes in smaller local populations where government is more local than a large centralized government. The United States government was kind of founded on that, focusing on the 13 colonies rather than a large centralized government in Washington, D.C., or I guess it started out in Philadelphia. But the idea was that government was to be kind of spread out, and the government officials would know the population, be familiar with the population, even by name and site recognition. So that's kind of one governmental principle we can draw from this. I also want to draw your attention to a map that we looked at before, and this map shows where the various people groups kind of gravitated to. The red parts on the map, kind of north, even northeast and west into Europe would be the descendants of Japheth. The Middle East here, the yellow part would be the descendants of Shem. And then over here in the African continent, Egypt and the other areas is in the green is the descendants of Ham. What I want to point out to you is the location of the plain of Shinar. It's right here. Shinar, I believe, was the name of somebody in one of the earlier genealogies that we looked at. But this plain, this is the location of the plain of Shinar. And here we have Babylon, which is probably where the Tower of Babel was built. A little, of course, in this area, we have the Euphrates River and then the Tigris River to the north and east of the Euphrates. This is the Fertile Crescent, the kind of birthplace of civilization, I guess. Down here in kind of the southwestern corner of the Persian Gulf is a place called Ur of the Chaldeans. In Hebrew, it's going to be Ur Chasadim. And this is going to be the birthplace of Abraham and his family. And of course, in chapter 12, we will talk about their travels from Ur up here to the area of Syria, still kind of connected to the Euphrates River, but to a place called Haran, where they will live for a while, and then eventually Abraham and his immediate family will travel south into Canaan, or the Promised Land. So that's kind of the geography that we will be looking at today. So having covered all of that stuff, let's go ahead to our text for today. Once again, I'm using the Accordance Bible software. As I've shared with you before, this is not my favorite software platform, but for the purposes we've been using it for learning to recognize and pronounce words and learn the definitions of words, this one is hard to beat, because when I'm pointing on a word and it's highlighted there in yellow, and then down in the information screen here in the bottom, we have like definitions of words, the roots of those words, parts of speech and stuff like that. And it just automatically pops up. That is really handy for the kind of study that we want to do. The information we get on these words is very basic. I prefer Olive Tree software for more in-depth word study. And their software platform is good. It doesn't highlight as well as this one does. And you have to click on these words in order to get the definitions of so forth and so forth. So I think I'm going to kind of stick with accordance here. The English Bible that we will be using today as kind of an English reference is the Complete Jewish Bible, but we won't be reading much from that. We're going to focus on the BHS, the Biblica Hebraica Stuttgartensia, kind of the basic scholarly Hebrew Old Testament. And then I also have the Septuagint version in the right-hand frame over here. And that is a translation of the Hebrew Old Testament into the Greek language about 200 or 300 years before Yeshua was born. So we have that to, kind of give us a little bit of extra information if we should want it. So let's go ahead. We're in Genesis chapter 11. And we'll just go ahead and begin reading here. The first word starts with a va, that means and. Yehi is the Hebrew word for it was. So kol, all, haaretz, the earth. Safa. Safa is a word that means your lip, like this is my safa. And it's kind of a synonym for the word language. So the whole earth was safa, or language, echat. Echat is a form, kind of a construct form of the root word echad, which means one. So this is saying that the whole earth had one language. There's another word that's used in connection with languages, and it's the word lashon. Lashon is your tongue, and I won't point to my tongue. But those are the bodily parts of us that we use to form, to speak words of languages. So what we need to appreciate right here is that the whole earth had one lip or language, and devarim, and words. Davar is word. Devarim is words. Achadim. Here, this is interesting because echad is the Hebrew word for one, but if you what? Pluralize it with the im ending. It means like it's one in the plural. And the reason we have a plural here is because we have a plural here. So ahadim is a kind of a modifier of the word devarim. And so basically what it's saying is the whole earth used the same language and the same words, the same ones, I guess. It would be a good way to frame that. Verse 2, V'yehi, and it was, ba, in, nasa'am. The am ending means like a group of people, plural. Nasa means to travel. It is actually a word that means like to pull out tent stakes and travel. So in order, like for a nomadic population, as we're dealing with now, in order for them to travel from one place to another, they had to pull up their tent stakes and roll up their housing, you know, and carry it to their next location. So nasa actually means to pull up or pull out, and it's used kind of a derivative meaning is to travel. But nasa almost always means to travel. Mikedem. Kedem means east or before, but usually means east. And the mem prefix literally means from, like away from the east. And you would say, well, that means west. It means like in a westwardly direction. But sometimes it's hard to tell which direction you're going, even from the context of a passage. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether the direction of travel is to the east or to the west. So sometimes mikedem means going west, and sometimes it means going east. Again, just hard to tell. And yimsa'u, matzah means to find. So they were finding. This would be an imperfect form of a kal or simple verb. So it means they, the u, the vav suffix means like they, it's a plural suffix. So they were finding or began to find Beka. Beka is the word for a valley. And let me come back to that for a minute. We'll go ahead and complete the sentence and I'll come back to that. Bika means valley. So they found a valley. It can also mean a plain. So the definitions that are given for us in the information window are valley or plain. I think usually valley. But in Eretz, in the land of Shinar, we talked about the plain of Shinar. So here's the word plain, and here's the word Shinar. Could also be translated the valley of Shinar. And since Shinar was in the river valley of the Tigris and Euphrates, it could very well be a reference to a valley. Vayishavu, and they dwelt there. The word also means literally to sit. So in other words, they put their tent stakes back in, pitched their tents, and they stayed there and built up this area. Sham means there. Let me go back to Beka for a minute. The way that I remember this is there's kind of a famous valley called the Beka Valley, and I think that's in Lebanon, might be in Syria. I might have the location wrong, but I just remember Beka Valley. And actually, Beka means tears. I think it's a little bit different spelling than we have here for valley. But when I see this word, I think of Beka Valley, and I remember the valley part of it, but the word tears is also Beka. So Beka Valley means the valley of tears. So that's kind of how I remember this. Okay, verse 3, Va and Yomru, and they were saying, this again is an imperfect kal, a verb. meaning they were saying, Ish, a man, El, to Reyehu. Re'ah is a word that means your neighbor or your fellow man or, other people in your network of contacts, I guess. It can also be like relatives and things like that, but basically people who live in close proximity to each other. Hava, which means to give or to come. I think it very seldom means to give, but it's a very common word for to come. And I always thought that it was a Hifil form of the word to come, which is bo, and I believe that's spelled Beit Aleph, but it's not. Yahav is the root word, Yud, Che, Vet, and it means, come along or come. It's kind of a command here. Nilvana, which is a verb, and lavan means to make bricks. So this would read, come, let us make bricks, levanim, which is the plural of the Hebrew word. This is a noun, and it's the plural of the Hebrew word for bricks. So this is the verb, let's make levanim, bricks, but it's just a repetition. It's the same root here, and it's just a repetition of the word. And nilvana, let us make levanim, bricks. The word levan also is the Hebrew word for white. And as we go on in this passage, we're going to learn that the way they made bricks was to take earthen material like mud or clay or, like topsoil, and they would break it. They would bake it really hot in ovens that were manufactured for baking bricks, or they could even do it in the sunlight. It would take a longer process. But I kind of suspect that they baked these bricks in ovens that would be heated so hot that the earth would turn white. The bricks would turn white hot. And then, of course, they would cool, and they'd just be literally stronger than dirt. It would be like a kind of building with stones, only the stones were molded into a very useful building shape. So they would be rectangular in shape. So you can remember that the Hebrew word lavan means white, but it's also the word for bricks, and bricks are earthen material that are heated white hot and very useful for building. And nisrafa, saraf is a Hebrew word that means fire or flame or fiery or something like that. There are created angelic creatures called seraphim. And these are the flaming angels, either the creatures that appear to be on fire, or they have like flaming swords and things like that. So seraphim are flaming angels. Karuvim or cherubim are another kind of created angel. But seraphs get their name from being fiery, whether that means temperament or like physical flames and stuff like that somehow associated with their bodies. So let's burn, le sarefa, which is a noun meaning burning. So here again, we have the repetition. We have a verb here, saraf. So let's burn, le sarafa, like burn in the fires. Vetahi, and it will be lechem, it will be like to them, halavana, it will be like bricks. And another definition here is pavement, but up until very recent times, bricks were paving material. There used to be a lot of streets, even in this country, that were formed by laying like paving stones of brick. La aven, aven is the Hebrew word for stone. Ve ha chemar, chemar is the Hebrew word for tar or asphalt. Chaya will be, lachem, for them, like for the bricks. La chomer. These two words are related. This one is asphalt or tar. And this one, same word, but in this context means mortar or clay. So what are they saying here? We will use these bricks that we bake to be like white hot and are going to be, really solid and firm, and we can count on them not crumbling in the weather and being eroded and stuff like that. So we will use these bricks instead of stones, and the asphalt or the tar instead of mortar. I don't know, mortar used to be kind of like a plaster thing. The way they would build buildings in the Middle East in these days was that they would build like a wooden framework or some kind of a frame. And they would, in order to build a wall, they would make a frame. And then they would fill the wall up with stones. And these are round stones or kind of oblong shaped stones. And they would pile up this wall frame with stones. And then they would pour this mortar, which would be, like I say, like with plaster or, maybe kind of an ancient form of concrete. And that's what they would make a wall out of. And then they would take away the framework, the wood or whatever they used for the framework, and you would have a nice, kind of a smooth wall there. But the problem with that was when you use stones that are round or oblong shape, you can't put much weight on top of that. You can't build more than 1 or 2 stories that way. But if you've got these solid bricks that you're using to build walls, and paved streets and stuff like that, you can build about as high as you want because those baked bricks are so solid that you can build about as high as you have the energy to build. And of course, that's what they decided to do. They have found a different method of construction that is a lot more solid than building out of uncut stones. And of course, another way to do the same thing is to cut round or oblong shaped stones into rectangular shapes. But that takes a lot of energy, probably more energy than it does to just take earthen material and bake it until it's white hot and then use that for building blocks. Okay, verse 4. Vayomru, and they said, Chava. So here we've got Chava again. So that means come. Nivne, this would be let us build, lanu, to us or for us, yir. Yir is the Hebrew word for a city. And migdal. Migdal is the Hebrew word for a tower or a watch, kind of a watchtower is a migdal. So it's a very high building. There is a place on the Sea of Galilee on the northwestern shore called Magdala. It's where Mary Magdalene was from. And the root word for the name of that city, Magdala, is from this word Migdal. And right behind Migdal is a very high cliff on one side of a valley that kind of goes from the Mediterranean Sea down to the Sea of Galilee. And that high mountain cliff is called the Migdal. So Mary, was from that city, Magdala, which was named after the Migdal there. Va, and Ra'asho, what does this mean? Rosh is the Hebrew word for top. So they want to build a city and they want to build a tower in the city. whose top or head, va in Shemaim. We know Shemaim is the heavens. So let's build a city in the heavens. Ve'na'aseh, and we will make lanu for us, Shem, which is the Hebrew word for a name or a reputation, or it has to do with fame, pen, lest, nafuts. Nafuts is the Hebrew word for scattering. Al panei, upon the face of, kol haaretz, upon the face of all the earth. So the reason they wanted to build this city and this tower that would have its top reach to the heavens was because they didn't want to be scattered. Even though God told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth by being scattered to those 3 continents we mentioned before, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to gather in one place and what? Make a name for themselves, like become famous for their awesome building project. Now, in the chart that we looked at before, and I guess I can go back to the chart and kind of show you a picture of what I'm talking about. In the picture, it shows that the, if I can get my cursor to point to the picture. I'm having trouble with my PowerPoint here. Rather than mess with, I mean, take a look at the picture of the tower there, and then we'll talk about it. It's kind of a curly-Q thing that goes up. That is supposed to be kind of an artist's rendition of what is called a ziggurat, which was a, I don't know, kind of a corkscrew-like building that the archaeological remains of which have been found in this region, in the plain of Shinar. And those were thought to be religious buildings. And some people have just said that the Tower of Babel was just a ziggurat. And that when they, when the people said, let's build this tower with the tops with the top of it, or the head of it in the heavens, they just meant that we'll build this big building, and up on the top level, there will be a worship place. And, it's where we will meet with the gods, and we can call that heaven because we're meeting with the gods there. We're worshiping the gods that we worship. Now, hopefully this would be the God of the Bible, but we see so much rebellion here that I don't think it was. I think they were making up their own religions. And in fact, the Babylonian religion, the ancient and the kind of newer Babylonian religion that we'll encounter later, it is kind of the source of satanic religion, devil-inspired religion. So some people think that the Tower of Babel was just one example of many of the ziggurats, and that the head being in the heavens just meant there would be a worship place, facility on the top where they could do their worship and meet with their gods. On the other hand, it may be more literal than that. These people may have gotten the impression that if they had this phenomenal, very useful building material, the levanim, these fire-baked bricks, that they could build a tower that would actually reach to heaven. Now, if they were familiar with the Bible at all, they knew that there were 3 heavens described in the Bible. The first was the atmosphere around the earth. The second was outer space, and the stars and planets and whatever else is out there. And then the third heaven is the place where God lives. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to kind of put those 3 heavens as like concentric circles. So we kind of think that the third heaven is probably out there at the farthest reaches or just beyond the farthest realm of outer space. And that's a possibility. But it's also a possibility that it may be closer to the earth than that. Since it is invisible to our eyes, since it is a spiritual place rather than a physical place, it may be very close to us. It may be at the top of the atmosphere or even closer than that. You may be able to reach up and touch it. It may be that the people who lived in the plain of Shinar there thought they could build a building high enough that would get them up to where the third heaven was. And that's where God lived, and they would meet with him and have their dealings with him. Now, for one thing, theologians are quick to point out that they were trying to get to heaven by their own efforts. And that, of course, is blasphemy in the biblical religion, because we have to be completely dependent on God's grace and his forgiveness to have access to the heavens. But I don't think it's unreasonable for these people to think that the third heaven was close enough that they could build a tower that would reach it. So who knows what the tower looked like? It might have looked like pyramids. I guess it might be worthwhile to point out that in the last couple of chapters of the book of Revelation, the new heavens and the new earth and the new Jerusalem are described. And the new Jerusalem is a huge city, like a celestial city, that now is located in the third heaven. And in the book of Revelation, in the latter days, will come down for a landing on the earth. And the dimensions of this city are given as 1,500 miles on each of 4 sides. And it's also 1,500 miles high. And some people think that the city is probably a cube shape, kind of like the Borg on Star Trek. I hope I've got the right TV series there, Star Trek, the Borg. But I think it's probably pyramid shaped, just based on the description that's given in Revelation. So that could be an indication of how high the third heaven is. It may be 1,500 miles high, which is way higher than just reaching up there and touching it. But at any rate, these are some of the speculations that go on. And as far as I know, this question about how far away is the third heaven, I don't think it's been resolved. But I tend to suspect that it's closer than out there in outer space. So we'll see. Someday we will know all about these things. Verse 5, let's see how God reacts to this plan. Vayered. And let's see, means to go down. This Yered is the root word of the Jordan River, Yarden. And it's a river that comes downhill from Mount Hermon up in the north and flows into the Sea of Galilee and out of the Sea of Galilee into the Dead Sea, which is the lowest place on the face of the earth, 1,200 feet below sea level. So it's a river that literally comes down from the heights of Mount Hermon to the lowest point on the earth. So somebody here came down. Who was it? Well, it's Yahweh. Or the pronunciation, kind of the conventional pronunciation here, since we have the 4 consonants for Yahweh, but the vowels for Adonai, it's usually pronounced as Adonai, which is a substitute. Instead of saying the sacred name of God, we say Adonai in respect for him. That was certainly an Old Testament practice that was begun probably in the Second Temple era, but it was continued by Yeshua himself and the apostles who wrote the books of the New Testament. So we'll go along with that. So Yerad came down, Adonai. Lirot, ra'ah means to see or behold what was going down there in Et Hayir, in with the city, va'et, and with Hamigdal, with the tower that they were building, Asher Banu, that they were building, Bnei Ha'adam, the sons of men, the descendants of Noah, his 3 sons. Verse 6, Vayomer Adonai, and the Lord said, Chen, behold, Am, a people, Echad, a people that are one. And here again, this is a good example where the word Echad is not used for numerical singularity, but it's talking about unity here. All these people from these 3 different family groups are together. They're one. they're united. The safa and their their lip or their language, achat, is one. Achat is just another form of ahad, only it is feminine. Ahad is masculine and achat is feminine. So your lip must be a feminine noun, and we see that it is. Lechulam, all things. To everything. Ve'zeh, and this. Ha-chilam. Chala is the Hebrew word that means to begin or to profane. The context just has to dictate whether it means to begin or to profane, and sometimes it's hard to tell. And this is one of those contexts where it's hard to tell. Basically, I think God is saying this and everything they're beginning to do, they will be able to finish, they'll be successful in this plan of theirs. Which inclines me to think that maybe the third heaven is closer than most people think, and maybe they actually could build a building that would reach it. I think he's not discarding the possibility. He's not laughing at them and saying, don't they know that the third heaven is, 3 million light years away? No, I think he's concerned that they might accomplish their purposes, what they started out to do. So what they begin, la'asot. The other thing I wanted to mention about this word, it could mean begin, like I've used it here, but what they're doing is disobedient and kind of a profanation, a profaning of God's intentions. So it could mean what they are profaning to do, like they will accomplish. This thing they're doing is sinful, and I don't like it. V'ata, and now, lo, it is not, or yivatzer. Vatser is impossible. It means to fortify or be impossible. And again, context will dictate. So I think God is saying no, or it will not be impossible, mechem, from them, call everything, asher, yizamu, zamam means to propose to do something or come up with an idea. Usually it's a bad idea, as is used in the Bible. And of course, this, from God's perspective, is a bad idea. La'asot, to do. This is an infinitive. So God is saying what they're planning to do is not impossible. They have the wherewithal to accomplish it, particularly if they're all together in one big group and they all have one language. They'll be able to figure out how to do a lot of stuff that is not pleasing to me. So what does God say? Hava, let's come. Nirda, let's go down. Navala, balal, means to confuse or to mix, to give feed. Never heard of that before, but navala. Let's confuse, sham, there, saftam, their language. Asher, which, lo, which, not, yishma'u, which, so in other words, let's confuse their language so that they won't be able to hear and understand ish safat, the language re'ehu, of his neighbor. So everybody's speaking one language. God is going to go down and confuse their languages. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is where God is saying, let's go down, let's confuse. The prefix here is a first person plural. Remember, we said that God is three persons, and there are lots of conversations between the three persons of the Trinity. So this is not saying I'm going to go down like singular. It's saying let us go down, which is plural. And so what's God going to do? But yeah, that's so God scattered them. And how did he scatter them? To kind of, achieve his original purposes of repopulating the earth. He did that by confusing their languages. So they didn't understand each other anymore. So they just kind of drifted off into family groups so they could kind of learn to communicate with each other. So Yafet's scattered Adonai, or Yahweh, Otam, them, Misham, from there, Al, upon, Pane, the face of, call, all, Haaretz, of all the earth. And here I think earth means the planet. The Yachadalu, and this is a, let's see, it's just a call. So it's just a simple verb, but it means to cease or to refrain. So so they, this is a plural ending, so they ceased or refrained from a love note, building with these bricks, Lavan, Hayir, the city that they were building and its tower. So it just fell into disuse once God confused the languages and scattered the people. Al-Chen, which means therefore, this means upon this, literally, so like therefore, or from there. Kara, let's see, he called, let me pull this up here to the top so I can get my English parallel. My English doesn't want to go up there. Okay, Al-Chen, for this reason or therefore, Kara, he called Shama, the name of it. This is a feminine form. Oh, actually, it's masculine, isn't it? Shama, the name of it. I think that's feminine. For name, I think that's the feminine form of name. This could be it's called a hey lochali. So the name of the place, Babel. This is where we get Babel from. And we think Babel, it's kind of an English word that means confused speech, but that's where that idea comes from. In Hebrew, it's pronounced Bavel, because Bavel is the root word for not only the place Babylon, but also for confusion of speech. Kisham, because there, Balal, that means to mix or to confuse. Adonai, Sfat, the language of call, all Haaretz. So that's why there are so many different languages in the world today. It's God's doing in order to accomplish his purposes of repopulating the planet. Misham, and from there, Cheftziam. Here again, we have futs, the Hebrew futs, which means to scatter abroad over all the earth. And that really is the end of the story of the Tower of Babel. And in verse 10 and following, we have a genealogy, which normally, if we were just doing ordinary Bible study, I'd say, let's just skip over the genealogy, because it's just a long list of Hebrew names. And there's not a lot of interesting stuff here. But for our purposes of learning how to read and pronounce Hebrew, it's really good for us, because we will encounter some names that we're already familiar with. And it's just good practice to sound out these Hebrew words. So Elah, this is Toledot. Toledot we've encountered before. It's the word for a genealogy. So this is the genealogy of Shem, one of Noah's three sons, the one through whom the Messiah would come. His other three sons were important, especially as ancestors of the various continental populations. But Shem is the one that the Messiah is going to come through. So he is going to be the one that the Bible is mainly about. So the genealogy of Shem. Shem, the same guy, Ben Ma'at. This literally means the son of Ma'at, 100 Shana, the son of 100 years. And practically speaking, that means that Shem was 100 years old at the time we're talking about. And it turns out that it was 2 years after the flood. Now, again, when we talk about how long it took to build the ark, most people would tell you it took 120 years because of something that God says in Genesis chapter 6 that leads us to believe that Noah had 120 years to build the ark. But that's not it. What that actually meant was, since Adam's name is mentioned in that verse, it means that Adam had 120 years out of his, what was it, 930 years, I think, that he lived. He had 120 years left before he would die. But the ark took less than 120 years, because at the end of the flood, 2 years after the flood, Shem is 100 years old. And in Genesis 6, so when God gave the command to build the ark, Shem was already grown and had a family. So he was, so there's much less time, maybe only 80 years for Noah to build the ark. Don't know exactly how many years, but it's certainly less than 120. So he was the son of 100 years. Vayoled, and he gave, or he fathered, I guess is the best way to say this. Women are the ones who bear children. He begot, I guess, caused to be born, et Arpachshad. So his son's name was Arpachshad. Shnataim. Shana is the Hebrew word for a year. This is the dual form. So we've got 2 years, ahar, after ha-mavul. Mavul is the flood of Noah's Ark. We have actually encountered this genealogy before, I think back in Genesis 10, maybe the last chapter we did in the Old Testament, when we had genealogies for all 3 of the sons of Noah. So we're going to encounter these names again. But the genealogy here is only Shem's, and it's for a distinct purpose that we'll point out as we get further through it. Verse 11, Vayehi, and it was Shem. Oh, this is not it was. This is a chet instead of a hey. So this means, and he lived, Shem lived, achare, after, Holid, let me get all of our vowels here. Holido, after he fathered, I guess, et Arpachshad, Chamesh, Meot, 500 Shana, Vayoled, and he fathered Banim, sons, Ubanot, and daughters. So we've got Shem being 100 years old after the flood, and then he lives another 500 years. So he's going to live a total of like 600 years. Now, this is a very long lifespan, but it's not as long as, most of the patriarchs who lived before the flood. They were living like 900 and 700 and 800 years. So the lifespan is starting to decrease. And as this genealogy goes on, we'll see that people are living fewer and fewer years until hardly anybody lives to be 200 years old. A lot of people live to be over 100. But Shem here lived probably about 600 years. So the lifespans are decreasing. And one of the reasons that we said this was going on is that my theory is that the rotation of the earth slowed down so that there were fewer days counted in a lifespan than there were prior to the flood. So that's my theory for a couple of kind of phenomenon in the early chapters of Genesis. So he lived 500 years, and he fathered sons and daughters. Then verse 12, the Arpachshad, Shem's son, Chai, lived Chamesh, 5, Shloshim, and 30 years. So he was 35 years old, Vayoled, and he fathered or begot et Shalach. Shalach means to send, but this was just the name that Arpachshad gave to his son. Yachi, and he lived, Arpachshad, Acharei, after Holido, after his giving birth to, at Shalach, his son, Shelach, Shalosh, 3, Shanim, 3 years, Va'arba'a, Meot, and 400 years. So he lived 403 years. Vayoled, Banim, Ubanot. So here we've got one generation that's passed, or I guess this is into the second generation. So Arpachshad, no, that's just one generation after Shem. Instead of living 600 years, he's living 400 years. So see how the length of human life is decreasing. Verse 14, Bashelach was Arpachshad's son. Chai lived Shloshim, 30 Shana, years. Vayoled et Ever. And he gave birth to, or he fathered, Ever, E-B-E-R or E-V-E-R in the CJB. We have pointed out before that Ever, his name is actually the root word for Hebrew, for the language and for the, the population, the ethnic group of the Hebrews. It means to cross over. And so it may have something to do with, crossing over the Euphrates River or something like that. Vayachi, and he lived, Shalach, Ahare, after Holido, after he brought about, this is Hifil, after he caused the birth of Et Ever, Shalosh, 3 Shanim, 3 years, the Arba Amaot, and 400 years, so 403 years. Vayoled, and he caused to be born Banim Ubanot, sons and daughters. Verse 16, Vayachi, and lived Ever, Arba'a, 4, Vashloshim, 34, Shana, years, so 30 and 4 years. Vayoled et Peleg. Notice that people are having kids when they're about, in their 30s. He was 34 when Peleg was born. Now, this genealogy doesn't tell us much about Peleg, but you'll remember in the genealogy from Genesis 10, I think it's verse 25, it says that during the lifespan of the lifetime of Peleg, the earth was divided, and his name was Peleg. So maybe he was named first and then the earth was divided, or maybe the earth divided and then he was named Peleg. Division is what that means. But that's Peleg's name. It just doesn't, here it doesn't tell us anything about the earth being divided, because that's not the subject. We are headed towards an important family group here. Verse 17, Briechi, and lived Ever, Ahare, after Holido, he caused the birth of, at Peleg, Shloshim, 30 Shana, years, the Arba Meot, and 400 years. So what would that be? 430 years was his lifespan. Vayoled, and he gave birth to Banim Ubanot, sons and daughters. Then verse 18, Vayechi, and lived Peleg, Shloshim Shana, 30 years. Vayoled et Reu. Reu was his son's name. Vayechi, and lived Peleg, Ahare, Holido, after giving birth to et Reu, Tesha Shanim, 9 years, Ve'ma'atayim shana, and 2 years. So Peleg has Reu when he's 30 years old, and he only lives 209 years after that. So this is a dramatic decline in the lifespans there. So 209 shana, years. Vayoled, and he gave birth to Banim Ubanot, sons and daughters. Verse 20, Vayechi, and lived Reush time, which is the Hebrew word for 2, time, Ushloshim, 30, so 30 and 2, Shana, Vayoled et Sarug, and he fathered Sarug. Sarug is his son's name. Verse 21, Vayechi Reu Acharei holy doe, after giving birth to et Sarug, Sheva Shanim, 7 years, Uma'atayim Shana, and 200 years, so 200 and 7 years, Vayoled, and gave birth to Banim Ubanot, sons and daughters. Verse 22, Vayechi, and lived Sarug, Shloshim, 30 years, Shana, Vayoled, and gave birth to et Nahor. Nahor is going to be important because he is going to be the father of, well, as we'll find out, Terah, and Terah is going to be Abram's or Abraham's father. So he gave birth to Nahor, Vayechi, and lived Sarug Acharei, after holy doe, he gave birth to or fathered at Nahor Ma'atayim Shana, 200 years. Vayoled, and he fathered Banim Ubanot, sons and daughters. Verse 24, Vayechi Nahor, and lived Nahor Tesha, 9, the Esrim, let's see, Tesha and Esrim, so that would be 20, Esrim. Eser is the Hebrew word for 10, and so since it's plural, it's the Hebrew word for 20, Shana, so 29 years, Vayoled, and he fathered at Terach, and Terach is Abraham's father. Vayechi, and lived in Nahor Acharei, after holy doe, he fathered at Terach Tesha Esrei, so this would be 9 and 19, 9 and 10, so 19 Shana Uma'at Shana, so 119 years. So his life is well under 200 years in lifespan. So each genealogy, each generation, the lifespan seems to be going down and down. And I think this may be accounted for, like I say, by a slowing of the rotation of the Earth. For a couple of different reasons that we discussed earlier. So, and Vayoled, and he fathered Banim Ubanot, he fathered sons and daughters. Verse 26, Vayechi, and lived Terach, Terah, Shivim, so what is that, 70 Shana, he lived to be 70 years old, Vayoled, and he gave birth to at Avram, at Nahor, so here we have Abram's name, then Nahor, which would be another son. And remember, Terach's dad's name was Nahor, so he named one of his sons after his own dad, Va'et Haran. So 3 sons were born to him. And it says this happened when he was 70 years old. So he may have been one of these guys who didn't father any children until he was an old man. And this will be a characteristic of the families of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They have to deal with a lot of barrenness among their wives and the women in their family. So it sounds like he was 70 years old before these three sons were born. They could have been triplets, they could have been born in close proximity, or it may be that the youngest of them was born when Terach was 70 years old. So, you know, maybe the other ones were born earlier in his life. Verse 27, Va'ela, and these are Toledot, or this is, oh, I guess this is, no, it's plural. So these are Toledot, the genealogy of Terach. Terach holid et Avram, he fathered Abram before Abram's name was changed to Abraham. Et Nahor, his other son, Va'et Haran. Ve'Haran holid et Lot, or Lot. So Haran was the father of Lot. So Haran is Abraham's brother, so Lot would be his brother's son. So Lot is the nephew of Avram. We're going to learn a little bit more about this side of the family tree. Vayamat, and he died, Haran died, al Paneh, before Terach. So he died before Terach, his father, Aviv, his father, Ba'eretz, in the land of Moladto. Yalad here is the root, so Moladto would be the land of his birth. Ba'ur, Ur is the name of the city, Chasadim. It's usually translated Chaldeans. So Ur is the city right there on the Persian Gulf that we looked at before. Let me see if I'm having any more luck with my PowerPoint here. Let me see where we stand here. Go back to my, whoops. It's not cooperating. Okay, let me go back to a screen share that's working. The Bible's working for me. So I hope you remember on the map where Ur of the Chaldeans was down there by the Persian Gulf. That's where Haran was born. That's where he died. He died before his father did. So then in verse 29, after Haran died there in Ur, Vayakach, and he took Avram, so Avram, Nahor, Abram's brother Nahor, Lachem, to themselves, I guess. Nashim. Nashim is the Hebrew word for women, or in this case, wives. I'll make it a little more personal. Took to them Nashim, wives, Sham, there. Eshet Avram, the wife of Avram, was Sarai. Now, her name gets changed later also. She will become Sarah, which means, I think it's like, princess, like of a multitude, like a higher level princess than Sarai. Sarai, I think, is like kind of exalted princess or something. Sarai means princess. Shem, and the name of the Eshet Nahor, of the wife of Nahor, was Milcah. Milcah was her name. She was the Bat Haran. She was the daughter of Haran. Now remember, Haran is a brother of Abraham and Nahor. So Nahor marries his, what would it be? Niece, I guess. Avi, Milcah, the father of Milcah, was Haran. Ve'avi, Yischa. Yischa was just Milcah's sister. Okay, verse 30. Vatahi, and she was Sarai. Sarah was Achara. Achra is the Hebrew word for barren. And this is a word that's going to crop up a lot when the women in the the family line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are discussed. So Sarai was Akra. We are told, and we'll be told in the next chapter, that Abraham got his call to follow God and go to the promised land when he was 75 years old. And Sarah was barren at that time. She was 75 years old, still barren. They didn't have any kids. So that was like a problem. And they had to wait 25 years to have any kids. Sarah was 10 years younger than Avram. So Avram was 100 years old when their son Isaac was born, and Sarah was 90. So for her to conceive at 89 years old and give birth at 90, I think requires some miraculous intervention there, but God has a reputation for doing that. So she was barren, and there was not la to her yalad. There was not a child to her. Then verse 31, Vatikach, and he took, who took? Terach. Terach, the father of Avram, took et Avram, his son, Abraham, Bano, his son, Vaet, and also, and Lot. Et is the direct object indicator. He also took Lot, or Lot, Ben Haran. We've already learned that Haran died in Ur Hasadim. So Haran is dead, but Lot was the son of Haran, and Abraham, actually Terah took Abraham and Haran's son, Lot, Ben Bano, like the son of his son, would be his grandchild. Vaet, and direct object indicator, Sarai, Sarah, his Kalto, his daughter-in-law, Eshet, Sarah was the wife of Avram, Bano, his son, Abraham was his son. Vayetzu, and they went out. They went out. Itam, with them. Ur, from Ur Hasadim, again, I'd like to show that on the map, but I'm scared to go to it now. Lelechet, to travel or to walk or to go. Aratza, to a land. Canaan, the land of Canaan. Vayavou, and they went like Ad until Haran. They went as far as Haran, Vayeshev Sham, and they lived there. Now, this is a little tricky because the city of Haran, where they lived, sounds a lot like the son Haran that died. But Haran's name is spelled with a He, and the city of Haran is spelled with a Chet. So it's pronounced a little bit different, and the spelling is a little bit different, and it's two different things. So then the last verse is Vayehiu, and they were Yamei Terach, the days of Terach, Hamesh, 5, Shanim, 5 years, Uma'ataim, Shana, and 200 years, Vayamat Terach Baharan. So Terah died at 205 years, and he died in the city of Haran. And once he has died, then Abraham is going to get on with his calling. And so that's what will be the main topic of our next reading from Genesis 12. We will study about the travels of Abraham from not only Ur of the Chassidim to Haran in Syria, but then also south into the land of Canaan, the promised land. And we'll talk about the Abrahamic covenant and all the implications of that. And the story really starts to get exciting because God has now chosen the family through which he is going to bring the Messiah into the world. So, since we've been reading from the Old Testament, let me give you the Aaronic blessing, which is found in Numbers chapter 6. We'll do it first in Hebrew. And since God instructed the priests of Israel to place his name, the name of Yahweh, on the people when they said this blessing, I'm going to use his actual sacred name in pronouncing the blessing. So here it is in Hebrew. Yivarechecha Yahweh vayishmarecha. Ya'er Yahweh panav elecha vayuhunecha. Isa Aaronic, or Yahweh panav elecha vayasem lecha shalom. And that means Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh look upon you with his favor, allow his countenance to rest upon you and give you peace. So that'll be it for today. Hope you'll be able to join us for our next Hebrew school lesson.